Here we go.
Welcome to another edition of AP Government Outside, where I teach outside because I don't have a classroom of my own or any quiet place in the school. But nature's good. The sun's out today. I would have recorded this earlier this week, but we had 3 days of pouring rain, so this is what I got to do. All right, so here we go. We're learning about 1.6 today, which is Principles of American Government. Now, the first part of this subunit really gets into Federalist 51, and I didn't feel like lumping that all together. So today's video is going to be specifically on Federalist 51, a brief intro to it. We're of course going to get much more down in the weeds of Federalist 51 in class as we read it and analyze it and annotate it and dissect it. But here's the big picture of it first. Here we go.
All right, so here we go. Some of the basics of Federalist 51. Now, the principles of the Constitution would provide safeguards against an abuse of power, right? What all the colonials were worried about in the Revolution. We didn't want another form of tyrannical power over us, whether it be a king, whether it be parliament, whether it be a federal form of government. And what the Federalist Papers did remember is to tell the people just how the Constitution works. So you have the Constitution, but this explains it piece by piece, how it works, how it functions, the ideas behind it, and why it's going to prevent that type of abuse of power. Remember, Hamilton gave Washington a copy of all the Federalist Papers, and Washington held that dear to him. He considered that a guidebook for him. So it's okay and it's great to read the Constitution and to see the parts of it, but this is the how-to book, the why book of how to make sense of it all. Now, the Constitution breaks our government into 3 branches of government, which we often refer to as the Madisonian model. But remember, it really comes originally from the ideas of Montesquieu that Madison modified to fit this type of constitutional government. Federalist 51 and some of the other Federalists were remedies for the concerns that Brutus I feared. Remember, Brutus was an anti-federalist. So anti-federalists had several concerns about the Constitution, that it would take away power from the states, that it didn't have a Bill of Rights, but also they saw a lot of red flags, a lot of warning signs about having a strong federal government. And this was Madison's rebuttal, where if you line up Brutus I and Federalist 51, you can literally go piece by piece and sort of see some of the reaction to that. All right, and these were published to inform the people of New York, where there were many anti-federalists. Remember, Hamilton was the only delegate from the state of New York at the Constitutional Convention that even approved of most of this stuff. Their own governor was not happy about it. So the people of New York, and New York was a really big state that you wanted to have on board. They were an economic powerhouse, so it was super important to get the people of New York behind this Constitution. Now, that's sort of everything I just said, right? They feared the power of a king again. Here's some lines about it. In order to lay a due foundation for that a separate and distinct exercise of the different powers of government, which to a certain extent is admitted on all hands to be essential to the preservation of liberty. It is evident that each department should have a will of its own, and consequently should be so constituted that the members of each should have as little agency as possible in the appointment of members of the others. Let's look at the highlighted part. Separated and distinct exercise of the different powers of government. So within the federal government, with those 3 branches, each one would have specific powers and different powers. They each would be responsible for different things, and they wouldn't be able to control the whole realm of government, if you will. And it goes on to say, but the greatest security against a gradual concentration of the several powers in the same department consists in giving to those who administer each department the necessary constitutional means and personal motives to resist encroachment of the others. So you're going to give certain branches certain powers, certain limits of their own, and certain powers to sort of check against the others. So Federalist 51, if you want the TLDR memory in your head, separation of powers, checks and balances. Another very famous line that you may end up using in an FRQ someday And you hear this a lot in the government. You hear this during campaigns. And that's the line, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. They did not consider King George an angel, if you read the Declaration of Independence. In fact, they really didn't consider Parliament angels either, right? You learned in world history about the Enlightenment philosophers, Hobbes and Locke, and what are their positions on human nature. And government is necessary because we can't trust humans to always do what's best, to do what's best for themselves, to do what's best for society. We'd like to think that everyone is a Mr. Rogers and will always do what's good for people, but even the best of people have selfish interests at times, right? There are maybe not devils, but they're not all angels. Past experience has taught us that you can't depend on people to be good and manage themselves. You have to put in checks to make sure that they're restrained from doing certain things that could be dangerous. And here's the other line here. You must first enable the government to control the governed, but also, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself. So a government has a responsibility to make sure things don't get out of hand, but we need to build things in the system so that the government can't get out of hand either. We need to put structural matters in place. And according to Madison and the Federalists, that's what Federalist 51 does. Here's a fun way to remember it now as playoff baseball is upon us today. Hope you're all excited for that. If you're not a baseball fan, maybe this won't help you. Maybe it will. Here's a fun way I remember the basics of Federalist 51. For the angels, right? If men were angels, no government would be necessary. There is a pitcher, number 51. Federalist 51, right? His name is Jamie Barria. Jamie is a derivative of James Madison, who wrote this. What is this about besides if the line with angels? Checks and balances. What do pitchers do? Someone's trying to steal, they check a runner, right? And what do they do when they throw that pitch? They really got to balance as well. They don't fall down and they throw a fastball or curveball or slider or whatever they're throwing. So checks and balances. James Madison, Federalist 51. If all men were angels, no government would be necessary. Hope this helps.
Stay tuned because the more to come soon on American principles and government.